Hi everyone, and sorry for starting this live later than scheduled. Dirk should be joining me any moment now.
Okay. Hi, Dirk.
Hello. Yeah, my computer or my phone had to. I had to change some settings.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry about this confusion with today's episode and for starting later than scheduled.
Hey, better late than never.
Agreed. So thanks for joining me again on this third episode of the Masculine and the Feminine, a MasterHeart, where we will be talking about emotions. This part within us that I know for myself and for a lot of women in my community and men as well, we have been alienated from this intimate part within ourselves. We were never taught how to regulate our emotions, how to process our emotions. It was a very foreign part of our inner world. And so this has created a lot of struggles for us growing up. And I know that the way I started learning more about emotions and familiarizing myself with that part within me was when I exited an abusive relationship and I was struggling with PTSD. And that was the place where it felt like I was in a black hole, and all of these emotions were just consuming me. And I know that I only wanted to get rid of them. I was not thinking about managing them or regulating my emotions. I was just wanting to get rid of all of that yuckiness inside of me. And this is how I moved into learning about emotions, because my goal was to get rid of them. But I learned better, right? But I want to ask you, Dirk, was it the same for you? Did you feel that a big part of your life you felt that you were alienated from your emotions? Was that part of your programming to alienate you from your emotions? And how did you manage to reverse that programming?
Well, it's definitely an interesting topic, and because I work with this all the time in my work. But since you asked me also the question personally, the short answer is no. If you still remember what you asked. So the short answer is no, because I begin to realize that I was actually very fortunate that I grew up with my mom and dad, but especially my mom, who encouraged always me to talk about anything and to share whatever I felt. So I've learned that since I was a young boy. But I begin to realize that it's maybe not normal, whatever normal is, because I see so many people struggle with that. However, interestingly enough, is that what is the difference between, let's say, an emotion and a feeling? How would you describe that?
I think a feeling to me is something that is more related to my senses. It is something that I can feel um, through my senses. But the emotion is something that is usually I feel it at the level of my heart. This is where I experience most of my emotions.
Yeah. So it's interesting, since we talk about masculine, feminine. When I, for example, have a chat with some guys or so, and they talk about, let's say, when their significant other or girlfriend or wife, has their monthly cycle, that she can be different in her state, or maybe she is cranky, or maybe she's a little shorter, or whatever it is. And then I think, yeah, of course, because when your hormonal system changes, that is basically what I call emotion, what I call energy emotion, is that something starts changing. And then we feel that, what you said, with a feeling in your senses, but it's all, of course, all deeply connected. So when our hormonal or the chemistry in our body changes. We suddenly feel something and we don't know what it is, maybe, or we sometimes recognize it, but maybe sometimes not. Maybe we feel angry, but maybe anger is not even the appropriate really thing, but it's our go-to that we often feel angry. So it can be very confusing. And then, of course, what we do, I recognize that you say, I just want to feel good. I want to feel normal. I don't want to feel this. And so if we don't have a lot of experience, we said, just go away. And of course, that keeps coming back. But the thing, what I used to feel, which I didn't talk about actually with my mom or with anyone, is often a bit of a sadness, because I think I felt a lot of the suffering, in the world from people as a young boy, or I didn't know that, but I felt a little different and I didn't know what to do with that part. So when you talk about your emotions, in that relationship, you sometimes, at least that's my experience, sometimes you don't know really what to do with it if it's unrecognizable. Now, of course, I'm older and I've learned in different ways to be okay with things because they come and go. Because that's what I realized with emotions. They come and go. And it's like you sit in a park and on a bench and people walk by. And there's this couple walking by, there's this young girl, and then there's this older man walking by. And so they come and they go, and you can analyze them and what they're up to and what their next steps are and if they're suffering in their lives or not. But basically we sit there and we just observe people. And that's what I've learned for myself with when it comes to emotions, to observe them, but also not to be too have put too much weight on them, because I know it's normal that you can feel things that sometimes are not even your own.
Yes.
It was probably related to the relationship, but I know for myself that I can feel certain things and I think they're not my own. I can feel some things in the world because we of course all are all deeply connected.
Thank you for sharing your unique perspective on emotions, Dirk. And I like that metaphor that you used to look at emotions as if we are in a park and we're watching people. It's like we're standing in witness of those emotions, and this seems to be a very empowering way to look at our emotions, because if I'm in that place where I'm experiencing all of the difficult emotions, I know that I would feel consumed by them, and I become the emotion to the extent where I'm like, there's nothing else I can be except sad. There's nothing else I could be except angry, and sometimes I wouldn't even be able to realize that there's another possibility for me to be not even neutral, let alone be happy. And so whenever we are approaching the issue of trying to better understand our emotions, trying to regulate our emotions and to manage them, how important it is for us to feel them, but then is there a line where I would like not be, where I'm not like being consumed by those emotions, if I'm making myself clear?
Yeah, I understand what you mean, and what you're saying, also about understanding your emotions. And it's a bit of a fine line that we walk when we discuss this, because first of all, I want to say is that, of course, men and women, because, I want to keep re-emphasizing that, because, you speak feminine and that will help empower them. And so, masculine and feminine, the women and men experience emotions differently, for sure. Comes to the chemistry in our body, and this is what I really like, and this is what I've learned in my work, that the chemistry in the emotion that you experience or that I experience is very, very similar. If we would open up our bodies, or we would tap our blood and we would check in, all the markers that change, it's actually very similar. The only difference is that you might experience them differently because you have a unique story. You are a woman, and so your body also functions differently. But the chemistry are similar. But it's also a tricky path to walk if people don't understand that, because they say, well, you cannot ignore your emotions. You have to, as you say, understand them and figure out why it is. And now, so I work in an extreme environment usually, where I work with people who have extreme emotions often that they cannot understand, cannot control, and they consume those emotions consume their lives often. And then I was working with a lady not too long ago, and she says, I'm so angry. And I said, and she says, I want to understand, why that is. And I said, for how long have you been feeling angry? And she looked at me and she says, well, probably for 30 years. And I said, oh, so you have already acknowledged your anger, for so long, and you probably know where it's coming from. She says, yeah, I know where it's coming from, but I cannot change it. And so for how long do we want to acknowledge our emotions? Because there is in neuroscience a principle, as you know, that says where our attention goes is also where we energize, is where the energy goes. And so if we focus on how angry we are, we actually propel that cascade of chemistry in the body, and we increase that, and it becomes stronger and stronger. So I've learned is that if you change the chemistry in your body, then suddenly the emotion changes, and suddenly it's being resolved, and you don't know why. Because we can have an emotion that's very appropriate. If I do something really, really unexpected and unkind to you, you can, it's normal that you become angry at me or disappointed. And that's an appropriate emotion, but it comes, and then maybe we talk about it, and then usually it goes. And that's normal. But if you, for example, have always that anger in you, and I say something and I really mean it well, I come from my heart, but you maybe do not fully understand it, and you become really angry at me, that is your first go-to emotion. You haven't learned to experience any other expression than you've ingrained that groove, on a vinyl record, that we used to play, and this groove becomes deeper and deeper. And therefore, that's really important to understand, because if there's only one go-to emotion, then it's not very helpful. It's not very adaptable. So I know many people who are always anxious, even though we sit in a very safe environment. So what we have to do now is we have to recondition the chemistry in the body to change that loop, because there is an element that the body, not you as a person, but the body becomes literally dependent and addicted to that chemistry. And not by choice, obviously, but it's more that the body it's so familiar to the body, that's the natural go-to. And if you keep repeating that, it becomes stronger and stronger with any addiction. And so you want to first recognize that. And that's why I love some of the science, because if you understand that, you say, yeah, I can try to figure out for the rest of my life why I'm always angry. But I've actually learned new tools, new ways, because I understand it's a chemical addiction, that I can change that. And then suddenly you feel different. You say, I always used to feel so angry. I could never control myself, but I'm actually doing better, and I see things from a different perspective now, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And it sounds like a very compassionate way to look at our experience, because if I now know that my nervous system could get me addicted to a certain state of being that I really don't like. I don't want to be in that state. But then I realize that my nervous system is now addicted to that. I may get into that place where I'm criticizing myself, or I'm hating that part within my nervous system. But learning that this is a protection mechanism. This is how the nervous system is programmed to work. This is the engineering of our nervous system. And realizing that I can do something about it, this is very empowering, because I could take my power from that programming and realize that, oh, I can create this new baseline, this new programming within our nervous system.
Yeah.
So thank you for giving us this example.
Yeah. And of course you become more compassionate, as you say, but in itself, the change that could cause the change is just the knowledge, the knowingness. There is nothing really wrong with you. For example, when I work with Brick's intense trauma, PTSD, they often are doubting themselves because they forget things, and they are having a hard time to make sense of certain situations, and they think they are a little dumb or stupid or whatever. But if you understand that after a traumatic experience, that your brain literally changes actually to protect yourself, what you said earlier, it is an intelligence of the body. Then if you know that in that situation, you say, oh, so I'm not stupid, you know, I'm actually, this is what happens. It's the same as you and I set out to run 10 kilometers, and you trained and I trained, but just before the run, I sprained my ankle, and it's really bad. And I try to run and I can't, and I'm getting very frustrated because you are faster than I am, and we trained always together, and I can, and I'm lagging behind. And of course, because my ankle is not functional at that moment, it's not ready to run. It needs to heal. And if we understand that, then you say, oh, okay, you know, I have a sprained ankle. Sorry, Rhonda, I can't really run. It's impossible this way. You could, but. And so the knowledge behind these things give us a better understanding. Then we take a more effective approach. And then, yeah, I think the result is that we feel better about ourselves, become more compassionate. We don't blame ourselves. We don't make it, as you said earlier, that we become that naturally, not necessarily.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for sharing this. Also, I would like to ask you a question, and I know a lot of our audience, I know from myself, from my female friends, a lot of women in my life, we have thought about this question a lot. And it is that the way we approach our emotions, since you said that it's different from the masculine and the feminine, how we approach these emotions. Do you think that for women, it is easier for us to dive deeper into that part within ourselves, to reconnect to that part within ourselves? Because we have also been programmed to alienate ourselves from that, because we're told you're allowed to feel happy, just you're not allowed to feel upset, because if you're upset, you're going to be annoying to others, to your man. So we're told there are only certain types of emotions that you're allowed to feel, but not other emotions. And I'm not sure if this is the same for men, but I do know that, for example, in my culture, men are empowered to express their anger, let's say, but not their love to their wives or to their kids, and so yeah, the way we allow ourselves to reconnect to that part. Do you feel that it is easier for us?
Well, I'm not a woman, obviously, but I believe that most of it, not everything, because we already quickly concluded that the chemistry and hormonal changes is different for men and women, of course. I think it's a lot of societal and cultural programming, and I guess for in your culture, it's not very different than in the culture that I currently live in. Not the culture that I grew up in, by the way, as people know, because I'm Dutch from origin, so I'm European. But I moved when I was 37. I moved to Canada, and I can say that, and it's maybe a little to use these words, but it's very typical here in North America. You know, if you're a guy, you express your anger, you're kind of a good, you know, you're a macho, you know, you're a dude, and you can show that. And if a woman does that, she's kind of a bitch, you know, and that is exactly how the societal norms are. And I don't think that necessarily in this way it's so much related to whether you're a woman or a man, but it's how you have been raised. I'm dealing with this all the time. I see that all the time. And but if you work with someone who has learned to be close to his heart, like a man in this case, myself, for example, um, I love to express my emotions. I love to, if I'm sad, I would love to lie on in somebody's arms and cry, because that is something that is not encouraged by my culture, and that is something that you normally wouldn't do out on, you know, in public or so. But then there is also a longing to do that naturally. I have not suppressed that. I've never learned to suppress that, but I realize it's not like the norm. And then I think you grew up with different filters, different lenses that we look through than I grew up with. So you grew up with, and you still, and me still, you know, we look through the lens of the masculine or the feminine. And so you look at the world. I try sometimes to imagine that, how you look at the world in this masculine society, and how you um, design your role and find a place in that society as a feminine, and me as you know, as a masculine, as a man. But I also do not resonate with the typical societal masculine. Have never resonated with that. And so I think both you and I might have some challenges there, just because we try to find our way in that. And then you have the lens, for example, of, and the filter, therefore, of, let's say, religion. You have the filter of society in general. You know, you and I grew up, as a man and woman. You grow up as whatever religion or not religion. You grew up in a certain culture. So there's many different ways that we look at the world through lenses, and those lenses give us a certain understanding of the world, and then we respond to that from the best way we can. And then I think, what if we remove those lenses? What if we take them away, and we look from our pure essence, from our non-programmed state, from our hearts, and we connect with the world? Then we come actually really, really close. You and I are almost one. You know, we are very the same in just so many ways, and then we understand each other really, really well. And I say, yeah, Rhonda, I really get that, because I can place myself in your position. And if we would do that as a society, then, you know, then everything will change. And that is pretty cool. And then there comes one other element I want to mention briefly, and I don't know if anyone relates to this, but I have very clear memory of some past lives. And that's a whole different way. However, if I have been experiencing multiple lives, that means that the chance is pretty big that I've been a woman. The chance is pretty big that I might have been fighting in a war somewhere. Maybe I was killed then. Maybe I have been killing someone. Maybe as a woman I've been giving birth. And so that stays on a deep soul level in a memory. And if you can access that, now you have a much deeper understanding how life works. And for me, that last part, and maybe people don't resonate with that, for me that's really important.
Thank you for tapping into that possibility of how we can bring these differences into one shared experience. Even though, like you said, we experience our emotions differently, we approach our emotions differently, you just laid out to us how we can merge these two different paths into one, first understanding the intelligence, like you said, the intelligence inside of our hearts, inside of our bodies, how that works. This seems to be a very empowering way to understand ourselves, to understanding our emotions. It's something that I'm very passionate about in my work as well. And I'm always sharing the science behind what I teach, the science behind what happens within the nervous system, the brain, the science behind our emotions, and this seems to have a big impact on my clients because they can start moving from I'm not normal, being in the state of experiencing all of this emotional chaos, into I'm normal. So this is normal what is happening to me. So and this gives them a big relief. And also, like you said, removing the veil of the filters. We each have our own filter that is different given our physiology, our experience in this world. But from what I understand from what you shared is that if we each start removing these filters, we can get to that point where we are witnessing this oneness that you mentioned. And if I could ask you about this future vision that you have about bringing the masculine and the feminine together within the same circle, how would you see that in terms of the role that we each play in facilitating that process of connecting to our emotions? Because I know from myself, when I see you see me, when you see me for what I am experiencing, and I feel seen by you and I feel understood by you, it helps me better understand myself and be okay with where I am. So how do you see us, the masculine and the feminine, within that same circle, playing each a role in our own evolution, but also empowering each other?
Yeah, you have the tendency to ask really deep questions, which I like. And we can do on this whole topic, we could do like a week-long retreat for that, and we probably wouldn't be finished because it's really interesting and intriguing. But the being seen and to being feeling understood, that is very attractive on many levels, because that is what we want. We want to be seen, we want to be held, we want to feel understood. But what we often do in our critical society, we focus so much on our differences. And then I often, to do maybe a little exercise and say, okay, yes, there are differences. A lot of those differences actually is because you and I look through certain lenses. It's just taught differences sometimes. And we see sometimes these images, on social media, where you see a white and a dark kid sit together with their arms around, and it says, no, like hatred is being taught. And so it's not natural from us. So if we begin to understand that part, but also to start recognizing what we have in common, what is not different between the masculine and feminine, what our deepest desires are. When you come closer from the heart and you see that there's a lot of things that we have in common, could we maybe start to embrace those? And then walking into some of the differences. But it requires, and this is, you and I were, before we started this, we were, talking about the image was freezing, and we're talking about the freezing and opening your heart, but that it requires to be vulnerable. And I think women in society in general maybe have taught, maybe not, and maybe you can correct me, and maybe depending on this on the culture, have been taught that it's okay to be more vulnerable sometimes. And for men, that is very, very scary, because they need to uphold a certain image of provider, of protector, and all that. And you cannot, because that is being seen as a weakness. And so therefore, on that level, I definitely believe that the masculine has some work to do on that level. But it can only do that when it feels safe in the work to be vulnerable. And so the feminine, therefore, wants to learn. The woman wants to learn to understand that vulnerability and to support him in that, and to create a space of safety where he dares to open his heart. And it's easy to say, hey, you never open my heart, you're closed and you're this. But what we're then doing is we're actually creating an environment where we freeze even more so, where we close off more. Because a man and a woman in that sense is not very different. It's not easy for a person in general, if you do not feel safe, to open up. So I think that's where the learning and the practice, and it takes a lot of courage for a man, for the masculine to further grow with that. But then, of course, he needs a safe space.
Thank you for mentioning that. That was exactly the question that I wanted to end this episode with, is that where our role is that as the feminine, as women, in empowering men to be vulnerable, to embrace that vulnerability. And I agree with you 100%. The safety is something very important for us. It is vital. Physiologically, it is important. For our nervous system, it's important. For the brain, it is very much important. And it is it is the way that we allow our feminine essence to flow. It requires that container of safety, that we know that it's the masculine that provides for us. But thank you for sharing that. It's also part of our responsibility to provide that for the masculine as well, and to hold that safe space for the masculine to open up vulnerability in a vulnerable way, and to express without shaming the man for sharing that part within themselves. And again, I believe that it has to start with me. I have to build that power within myself to embrace, to unapologetically embrace my vulnerability, so that I can start experiencing it as part of my power, as part of how I practice my own sovereignty, and so I can mirror that to the masculine in my life, so that he can see that I'm truly empowering you, and I see you in your power, instead of I see you in your weakness, when the man is expressing his truth and his emotion. So
yeah, I have spoken before about this, personally, but I really love when we can integrate everything. I'm not personally a big fan of only men's circles or only women's circles. Sometimes it can work, but we need you to do that work. We need that. And it's easy to say, hey, the men need to do their work, and whatever that is. But that's, again, then we do not create a safe environment for each other. And I think if we really understand that we are so similar in many ways, of course there are many differences, but we have the same basic needs, from our hearts. And if we understand that, then we want to come together and say, well, maybe we are very different, but still, I want to help to empower you because I love you and I want to see you shine. And then the other person says, I want to see you shine too. And let's embrace that together, and let's grow in that. And that requires, again, it requires maybe a different approach, maybe a different, from what you're used to, or maybe, or definitely vulnerability. But that's also, I think, the beauty in that.
Agreed.
Then
Definitely.
we battle together and say, hey, we need to be together. You need to understand me and I need to understand you. Go to battle. But if you create a beautiful dance together and say, hey, it feels actually really good, and hey, if you make this move and I make that move, actually it feels much better, which is a way more, I guess, graceful way of looking at it, and more effective, I think.
Oh, absolutely. I know I have to be very mindful of the time, so that I don't take more of your time than what you have allowed us. And I think we're past the 30-minute mark. But this has been juicy as usual, and I know a lot of our audience are going to be very inspired by what you shared, especially the part where where you are talking about how we each play a role in the evolution of the other, or in empowering the other to reconnect to that part within themselves. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, and looking forward to our next meeting next month. And as usual, I would like to invite the audience to ask any questions they would like to ask by leaving them in the comments. And yeah, thank you a lot. Thank you.
Yes, let's do it again. Thank you so
Absolutely.
much for one who is paying attention. If you do have questions, indeed, please let us know, because I'm very passionate about this topic. So whatever comes up, let us know. So thank you, Randa.
Yeah.
Yes,
Thank you,
for
Dirk.
hosting me.
Yes, absolutely. My pleasure. Thank you, Dirk, and thank you to everyone who has watched this live. Thank you and goodbye.